Hello. So, I grew up in the South Island, so I thought the Crusaders were cool. They had the big entrance with the horses and the fire, and then a game of rugby would kick off and I'd sort of lose interest. But point is, the Crusaders were cool. I didn't really think about what the word Crusader meant. I just thought it was like another word for knight. Now, since the 2019 mosque shootings in Christchurch, there's been some debate about whether or not the Crusaders should be called the Crusaders. There's been some pushback, most notably by the Crusaders themselves. You know, they're a business. The most important thing to a business is their brand. But with even a cursory understanding of what the Crusades actually were, I don't think anyone would want the Crusaders to be called the Crusaders, not even white supremacists. So I'm going to illustrate this point, and to do that, I'm going to talk about something called the People's Crusade, to point out why the Crusaders is a stupid name for a rugby team. This is a piece of my old bed. This is what the wood is. I keep breaking my old beds. I bet you know how I break them too, because I don't put them up properly. So it's 1095 AD, and Pope Urban II comes out and he's like, "What up, Christianity? It's your boy, the Pope, and our good friends, the Byzantines," around this sort of area. They have asked for our help against the invading Seljuk Turks, who are sort of over here. And they want our help against them. We're going to push the Seljuk Turks back. And shit, while we're there, why don't we nip on down to the Holy Land and take that back for Jesus? And then a bunch of Christians were like, "Let's fucking go!" And then the Pope was like, "Not yet. It's a long trip, and I don't want you boys getting peckish, so we got to prepare." And a bunch of Christians were like, "Fuck that, we're out of here." So, a little background first. Things in Middle Ages Europe were shitty, and shittier than normal. That won't come as a surprise to most of you. It was shitty in Middle Ages Europe, but it was shittier than normal shitty Middle Ages Europe. For one, there was gangrene going around. Side note, gangrene can cause sepsis, and sepsis does give people fevers. So just keep in mind for the rest of this story, maybe these people weren't in the best headspace. Point is, the Pope saying, "I think we should leave medieval Europe," was probably received with a lot of enthusiasm. Several reasons why the People's Crusade started before the Pope wanted it to were, one, they wanted to get to all the good looting first. Two, they didn't want the nobles telling them what to do, you know? They didn't want to get bossed around by some knight. What are we going to do, just get bossed around by some knight with military experience and resources? I don't think so. We've got Jesus on our side, and that dude is ripped. By far, the biggest reason for this enthusiasm for the Crusades, however, was that the Pope had offered plenary indulgences for anyone who went on crusade. So just complete forgiveness for all your sins, right? Imagine you're a medieval peasant. You've probably done some shitty shit to survive, right? It's hard out here for a bitch. And then the Pope says, don't even worry about that. If you go do shitty shit to other people that have the audacity to wear a different kind of hat, God's going to be cool with it. Also, keep in mind that that's the mindset all of these people are going to have going forward, right? None of this counts. None of these sins count. None of these sins will track. What goes on crusade stays on crusade, baby. Now, the most important figure in the People's Crusade is a guy called Peter the Hermit, who said that he had a vision about taking back Jerusalem for Jesus, which is weird to me because famously Jesus did not have a good time there. A lot of historians write about how charismatic and charming Peter the Hermit was, failing to mention that what he was selling was a genocidal rampage. And Peter claimed that he'd had a vision from God. He hadn't. And he said that he'd been to the Holy Land previously. He was probably lying about that as well. And he was telling everyone, "Oh, it's terrible over there. They're killing all the Christians." And presumably someone was like, "If they're killing all the Christians, how did you get out?" And he was probably like, "Oh, because I'm too fast." Too strong. One of the guys inspired by Peter the Hermit was a guy called Count Emicho, who also claimed to have a vision from God about taking the Holy Land. But then he was like, oh, you guys are going now? Like all the way? All the way? Right now? I mean, we'll catch you up for sure. We'll see you there. But like, I mean, there's a lot of non-Christians in Europe right now. He's talking about the local Jewish population. And like, that's bad, right? Like, non-Christians, that's bad. Like, we gotta kill those people. And yeah, sure, like the Jewish population is less well armed and smaller, and they've got plenty of loot to take, and we don't have to schlep all the way through Europe and into the deserts. So, Count Emicho started killing Jewish people in what today would be called Germany. I know, anti-Semitism in Germany, you wouldn't read about it. Also, they had a goose with them. There was a goose. This goose, someone saw it going towards the Holy Land, and they were like, this goose wants to go on crusade. There's a rugby team named after these people. In the village of Worms, the local Jewish people went to the priest there, and they were like, well, can you help us? And the priest offered them sanctuary. And when Count Emicho and his men got to Worms, no doubt led to Worms by the goose, he was like, hey, what up? Got any Jews? And the priest was like, yeah, but not today, bud. They're safe here. I'm looking after them, and it's not like you're going to attack me, our priest, and like kill the people in my house, because this is all for Jesus, right? And Count Emicho was like, I think I might actually. I think that sounds like a bit of me. And reportedly, he slaughtered about 800 people. A detached band of Crusaders, led by a man called Gottschalk, left Count Emicho's band and went to Hungary. And they went to Hungary and they were like, hey, what up? We're to kill Jewish people. And the Hungarians were like, get on in here, you scamps. So they started killing Jewish people, but then they also started killing the Christian Hungarians as well. They started pillaging the countryside. So the Hungarians kicked them out, and they'd join Crusades later on down the line. Meanwhile, Peter the Hermit had amassed a following of about 40,000 stinky weirdos in Cologne. Some women and children, mostly peasants, but a good collection of knights. And one of those knights was Walter Sanavoire, which was Peter the Hermit's lieutenant. And Walter was very keen. He was like, let's fucking go! Peter tried to tell Walter to chill. And Walter was like, let me fucking bang, bro. Let me fucking bang, bro.
Let me bang, man.
I want to do that, man.
Let me bang, bro.
I do.
Bang, bro.
I do.
Let me bang,
I
man.
do let you bang. Hey.
Let me bang again, man.
So Walter couldn't wait, and he took some of his men through Hungary, where the Hungarians were like, okay, just keep it going, pal. And then they got to Belgrade, which was actually Byzantine territory. Once they got to Belgrade, the garrison at Belgrade was like, who the fuck are you? And Walter Sanavoire was like, we're the fucking Crusaders. And the garrison was like, isn't the crusade meant to start in like a few months? And Walter Sanavoire was like, you looking to get fucking crusaded, bro? So then there was several skirmishes between the Crusaders and the Byzantines, the very people the Crusades were supposed to be helping. You cannot make this shit up. The Crusaders were eventually corralled by the Byzantines, and the Byzantine commander was just like, fucking get out of here. And Walter was like, what are we gonna eat? And the Byzantine commander was like, you can eat a fucking dick, bro. Oh, I got him good. Oh, it's not going away. Fucking. Let's try that again. So the Byzantine commander told Walter and his men to fuck off, and Walter was like, well, we're gonna starve to death. And the Byzantine commander was like, that's not my fucking problem, dude. And Walter Sandoval was like, we'll make it your problem, we'll pillage the countryside. And so the Byzantines fed them, and it's like, just fuck off, we'll give you all the food you want, just fuck off. So those Crusaders would go to Nice, where they'd wait for Peter. Meanwhile, Count Emicho and his men had run out of Jewish people in this area, so they went to Hungary again. And the Hungarians were like, what the fuck? And when the Crusaders got to Hungary, they were pretty hungry themselves. So they pillaged the countryside. Hungary at this time is a very Christian nation, by the way. When the Crusaders pushed further into Hungary, the Hungarian army was deployed, and so they fought with the Hungarian army, and these poorly trained, poorly outfitted Crusaders went up against this well-trained army, but the Crusaders had God on their side. But I guess, the Hungarians did too, and I guess God does a coin flip in those scenarios. I don't know. Anyway, they got their asses kicked. Many of these people would join other crusades later down the line. Count Emicho himself would return to what would be modern-day Germany, where he'd be occasionally mocked for his failed crusade, but face no other consequences, because history is a fucking nightmare. Meanwhile, Peter and his boys get to Hungary also. And then I'm going to explain this best I can. In Hungary, there's a dispute about the price of shoes, and then there's a fight about it, and the Crusaders kill about 4,000 Hungarians, and then they leave Hungary, and they go to Belgrade, the very Christian, very Byzantine city of Belgrade, and they burn it to the fucking ground. I don't know how to make sense out of any of that. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't wear shoes if I can help it. I don't like wearing them. So, you tell me, is that a thing? You go to a shoe store and you're like, this overpriced shoes? I'm going to kill everyone in here. 7 days after burning Belgrade to the fucking ground, they get to Nice, and Peter's like, what up? It's the crusade. And boy, we're hungry. And the commander at Nice is like, cool, we'll give you all the food you need. You just have to fucking relax, okay? Just fucking relax for 5 minutes, and you just don't pillage the countryside. And some of the Crusaders are like, you want us to... What? You want us to not pillage the countryside? It sounds like you're trying to stifle me and who I am as a person, so maybe just back off. So naturally, they pillage the countryside, and the commander at Nice sends out his full force against the Crusades, and they kill about 10,000 of the Crusaders. The remaining Crusaders were escorted to Constantinople, and once Peter got to Constantinople, he met up with his old mate Walter Sandoval, and Walter Sandoval was like, let's fucking crusade, baby! Yeah! And Peter was like trying to tell him, like, just chill, bud, we'll crusade soon, bud. We're gonna go fucking crazy out here. And Walter was like, let me fucking bang, bro! Let me fucking bang, bro! So Walter started, and you'll never guess this, he started pillaging the countryside. So the Byzantine Emperor Alexius Comnenus was like to Peter, he was like, bro, you gotta tell your guys to chill. And Peter was like, no. And also, we're hungry. So Alexius Comnenus fed the Crusaders for a while over his own people, the Byzantines, who, again, the Crusades were meant to be helping. And eventually Alexius shipped them over the Bosporus to Turkish territory, where they started pillaging the countryside and finally killing some fucking Muslims, right? Except no, because this was all still pretty much Christian territory. Eventually, Peter had lost all control over this crusade, and so he went back to Constantinople, where he'd wait for the next crusade, and he'd bitch out of that one too. I know. This genocidal maniac is a hypocrite and a coward. The new leaders of the crusade were a guy called Reynold for the Germans and a guy called Geoffrey Borel for the French. And Reynold would go off and he'd be like, look at how good we are at crusading. Look at all this shit we've pillaged. It's all for Jesus. Look at all this. And Jeffrey Burrell would be like, that ain't shit, man. You don't know how to crusade, you fucking piece of shit. This is how you crusade, you dumb piece of shit. And Reynold would be like, fucking call that crusading, mate. That's not crusade. This is crusading. And Jeffrey Burrell would be like, fuck, this shit crusading, you shit. This is crusading. Eventually, this would ramp up to the point where Reynold would actually take a fortress and actually genuinely be fighting the Turks at this point. He'd take the fortress, and then the Turks would be waiting outside, and he'd go, we've got the fortress now, what are you going to do? And the Turks would be like, nothing. You guys getting thirsty in there? You see, there was no water source in the fortress, so the Turks just waited until the Crusaders got sick of drinking their own piss. No, really, they drank their own piss. And then they went out and they attacked the Turkish forces head on and got completely destroyed. Then 2 Turkish spies went to Jeffrey Burrell and the French, and they were like, woof, man, the Reynold and the Germans and the remaining Italians, they're fucking crusading like crazy. They're going crazy over there. They took a fortress, they took another town, they're fucking pillaging everybody, and they're killing all the Turkish people, and they're definitely not drinking their own piss or dead or converted to Islam. They're doing really well. Anyway, you should probably do something, because otherwise you're going to look like a bitch. But the stalwart Crusaders would not be so easily tricked. I'm kidding. Of course this worked. What are we talking about here? So they started marching, going, crusade, crusade, all the way into a Turkish ambush where they were completely fucking slaughtered. The women and children were let go. Yeah, there were still women and children there at this point. Some few thousand of the soldiers would flee off into different areas, but other than that, the crusade was completely wiped out. And that's the People's Crusade. Basically, what happens when you use your villages as an attacking force in Age of Empires. Now, when white supremacists talk about the Crusades, and they talk about it, trust me, believe me, they love talking about it. Oh, and also, as a side note, ISIS, in their advertising, their marketing material, apparently they refer to the West, the entirety of the West, as the Crusaders. Which is kind of awkward if we're like, we're not the Crusaders. Don't look at this rugby team though. Anyway, when white supremacists talk about the Crusades, what they're actually talking about is the First Crusade, the one that happened after the People's Crusade, or they're talking about Richard the Lionheart, more successful genocidal rampages, yay team. But the Crusades, by and large, were complete military failures. The white supremacists certainly aren't talking about the People's Crusade or the Fourth Crusade, which was a crusade by Christians completely against other Christians to pay off a debt, basically, which is, of course, the only way a crusade is going to happen these days. Forget about forgiving my sins, forgive my student loan. But that's the thing about history. You don't get to pick and choose the parts that you want to romanticize. And if you're okay with the Canterbury rugby team being associated with Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, killing other Christians, then, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to dissuade you. But why would you want to be associated with something that's so fucking stupid?